Hello, I'm here to talk about some of the movies I watched last month. I've recently moved and I'm very close to a cinema which shows free movies. So literally my biggest dream come true. It's been around 8 years now since I started tracking all the movies I've watched, and I've watched a lot of good stuff since then. So in January I watched 14 movies. Of those, all of them were in the cinema except one. One thing to add is that I give ratings to films, but not all films, and sometimes you'll just see a love heart or nothing there, and that's because I just don't think I could give a fair rating to the film. And so love hearts usually represent that I like the film. So the first movie of the year, and it was a absolute classic, Jurassic Park. I think you would have to be a dinosaur yourself to not have heard of this movie, so I won't go into too much detail on what it's about. One thing I loved about this film on a rewatch was Jeff Goldblum's character, who is just so peculiar. He's so erratic and hilarious at the same time. He gives such a good performance, and I know Jeff Goldblum is known to be a little strange, and so maybe he's not playing much of a character, but some of his quotes in this film are iconic. I envy anyone who was able to watch this back in '93. I was, of course, not alive back then, but I did manage to catch this in an outdoor cinema, so it was in a rainforest kind of area. It was pretty immersive, I would say, and made the experience much better. The second film I watched was Playtime by Jacques Tati. Playtime is set in an alternate universe Paris. It follows the protagonist, Monsieur Hulot, who wanders through a hypermodern version of Paris, where he's meant to meet an American tourist that he's meant to connect with. As he repeatedly fails to meet this tourist, he becomes more and more lost in this labyrinth that is Paris. The day turns into night and he keeps wandering into stranger places with strange people. It creates such a unique sense of isolation and hopelessness that kind of reminds me of Scorsese's After Hours. I wouldn't be surprised if that film was inspired by this one. Although the environment is sterile and even hostile at times, the film still shows the warmth of humanity no matter the situation. Along with its incredible set designs, it makes sense why this is an all-time classic. The next movie I watched was Breathless by Jean-Luc Godard. The film follows the protagonist, Michel, who impulsively kills a police officer. Basically, he's on the run in Paris and he comes across an American student, Patricia, who he tries to persuade to run away to Italy with him. As with many French New Wave films, there is an excess of dialogue and rambling. I think the acting is wonderful by both leads. It is really confidently directed. On an emotional level, I don't think I could connect with it, and especially Michelle being such a sleazy and unlikable character at times, but I really did enjoy the pace of this film. It was rapid and exciting and everything you expect from a French film in the 60s. Next, I rewatched Beau Travail. I realized this is the third French film in a row now, but of all of them, this is definitely my favorite. This is directed by Claire Denis. This is the film that comes to mind when you mention the words visual poetry. The way that Claire Denis shoots this film is just so beautiful. I watched this a few years ago, but not in a cinema. This viewing in a cinema definitely enhanced it, to the point I've added this to my favorites list. Denis understands perfectly that communication can be largely non-verbal, and she manages to capture the essence of masculinity through these characters with a precision that's just unmatched. Deeply personal and complex emotions can feel so palpable through the screen. Things like jealousy, longing, rage, hope, and despair, everything in between, are all beautifully portrayed in this film. It's completely timeless, and I feel like you'd get something different out of it on each viewing. So for that reason, I'm giving this a perfect score of 5 out of 5. Next movie I watched was The Third Man. It follows a writer, Holly, who arrives in post-war Vienna. And this is quite literally post-war because this was shot 3 or 4 years after World War II. And he arrives there to meet with his friend Harry, who I think has promised him a job of some sort. But upon arriving, he learns that Harry has died. The film follows Holly trying to uncover the truth of what happened to Harry. So the highlight for me in this film was Orson Welles. And if If that name sounds familiar, he directed Citizen Kane, but he was also a prolific actor. His screen presence is just so commanding, so charismatic, so evil. He plays such a sleazy and cunning character in this film as well. The next movie I watched was The Addiction, directed by Abel Ferrara. So this movie follows Kathleen, who is a philosophy student in New York. She's randomly bitten by a stranger and becomes a vampire pretty much. This film is far from your typical vampire movie though. A lot of people interpret this film as an allegory for drug addiction, which it may as well be. This film just exudes evil and violence, but not in your straightforward physically violent way, although there are scenes like that. It's more violent for the soul and psychologically. It feels like a stain and you feel so dirty watching it. This is all compliments to the film. All of it culminates into such a cool film by Ferrara, and I think it's a very self-aware film as well, and there's definitely funny moments. Definitely a fun watch for me. So I finally watched something from this century, and that was Hamnet, one of the Best Picture nominees for this year, directed by Chloe Zhao, who also directed Nomadland in 2020, which did win Best Picture, I believe. One of the biggest reasons I went to watch this film was because of the composer Max Richter, who I also got to see live in concert. It ended up being a really powerful exploration of grief. I think the performance by Jessie Buckley was great. She does such a fantastic job in this film. I think grief is such a universal feeling, and I do think the film explores that quite well. The next movie I watched was Oldboy, directed by Park Chan-wook. Every time I bump into a Korean, I always ask them if they know Park Chan-wook, one of the most celebrated South Korean directors. 99% of them say no until I mention this film. The film follows the main protagonist, Oh Dae-soo, who's imprisoned for 15 years without any explanation, and then he's suddenly released and he's hunting for who captured him. So this is one of the earliest films in my watch list. It took me all these years to finally watch Oldboy. I'm glad I did, but I also didn't feel too invested in the film. For me, I absolutely appreciated it, and I'm trying to be intentionally vague here. I don't think everything in the story stuck the landing. Again, wasn't too emotionally invested or rooting for the main protagonist as much as I would have liked to. Next, I watched Once Upon a Time in the West, directed by Sergio Leone. He is best known for his spaghetti westerns. The movie has such an iconic opening sequence. It is very slow and has no dialogue, but it builds this world up so well and creates this tension. Iconic score from Morricone, rest in peace. The film was also quite a visual feast. Some of the camera shots and angles were so cool. Leone loves to utilize that extreme close-up. You can definitely see how effective it can be, especially in a genre like a western. Next, I watched The Trial, directed by Orson Welles himself. This is my first Orson Welles, and this is a film based off Kafka's book of the same name. This follows the protagonist Joseph K, who wakes up and is under arrest. He has absolutely no idea what he's done wrong, and as the title suggests, the film and the book both follow this protagonist as he undergoes a trial for a crime that he does not know he committed. Kafka is a master at creating these dreamlike nightmare scenarios. Some of the cinematography, set design, and camera work in this movie is completely unmatched from anything I've ever seen. It just creates the atmosphere of Kafka so well. The main protagonist is played by Anthony Perkins, who was the lead in Psycho, and so he was at the height of his fame, and he plays this character who's so confused and lost in such a perfect way. Of course, I still need to check out Citizen Kane and the other stuff from Orson Welles, but this was such a great introduction to his work. Next, I watched The Conformist, directed by Bernardo Bertolucci. This film follows Marcello, who is a weak-willed man, and he's desperate to fit in and also escape his traumatic past. This leads him to join the fascist secret police in 1930s Italy. He is tasked with assassinating his former professor, who is a strong opposer of Mussolini. This was an amazing movie. There is no black and white good and evil in the world, and this explores those gray areas of morality, and it really explores the humanity of a character such as this one. But also the film takes its time with the other characters in the film and how they shape the protagonist's worldview, and more widely how the actions of these characters and the protagonist were kind of catalysts to the ultimate reform in that time period in Italy. This film was also very beautiful. Some of these shots you would just not believe were shot nearly 60 years ago. I honestly would love to rewatch this. Then I watched Marty Supreme. This is directed by Josh Safdie and of course stars Timothée Chalamet, who seems like the biggest name in Hollywood at the moment. This film is about a table tennis player who has ambitions and dreams that no one respects, but he will go to hell and back in pursuit of greatness. And on a meta level, this is a film about Timothée Chalamet. He kind of is that character and has ambitions that reach beyond what anyone can comprehend. I think it is the perfect casting, to be honest. I had high expectations, of course. The first wave of praise from critics, and I started seeing what my friends were rating it. It was just a very high expectation, and it still managed to blow it away for me. And of course, I have to mention the absolutely amazing and powerful score by Daniel Lopatin, who made this movie 10 times better. This was one of the best scores I've heard in a while. The next film I watched was The Lovers on the Bridge. This is another French film directed by Léo Carax, which is actually a pseudonym for the director. The two protagonists in this film are played by two powerhouses of French cinema, Juliette Binoche and Denis Lavant. Both give generational performances in this movie. This is a very simple love story between two homeless people in Paris who meet on a particular bridge. Both of these characters are extremely complex and just have heavy loads of trauma. They have just gone through hell. They manage to find some solace in the love between themselves. The character Michel is slowly turning blind, while Alex is a drug addict who basically doesn't even care if he lives or dies. Yeah, I actually added this to my favorites afterwards. If you ever get the chance to watch this, especially in a cinema, there's such an exhilarating sequence. Or there's a few in the film, but there's definitely one you would know if you see it. It's just marvelous. It is so amazing. The last film I watched in January was The Navigator, directed by Buster Keaton and Donald Crisp. Buster Keaton, of course, is one of those silent film legends, definitely on the Mount Rushmore of silent films, if not cinema in general. The Navigator is one of his lesser watched films. It's about a wealthy but inadequate man, played by Keaton, who on a whim decides to propose to his beautiful neighbor. She turns him down, of course, but they both somehow end up on an empty cruise ship. This film is about their adventures on the boat. Keaton's character is so used to servants that he doesn't even know how to boil an egg. So it's about him learning how to do all that, learning how to love, learning how to care for someone. Something so unique about silent films. There's no dialogue, and so I really respect silent film stars back in the day when they had to use their physicality, their facial expressions, and utilize that to pretty much the maximum efficiency to portray some of these deeper emotions. Of course, so much communication, as I mentioned in Beau Travail, is non-verbal, and so silent films are such a great way to see not only the origins of the art form, but some of the best acting is from silent films. So I totally forgot to mention, I watched this with a live music performance with the Wurlitzer organ, and this is a very, very complex contraption which has pipes that actually extend beneath the cinema seats, and it has various instruments attached to it, including your classical instruments like piano, woodwind, percussion, but also it has instruments that produce sounds like bird chirps or door knocks. On top of that, the deep sounds of the pipes from beneath your seats. This is definitely one of the most immersive cinema experiences I've ever had, with the live performance in front of me. And there's actually no electrical sound amplification. This is completely just from the instrument. They actually need 2 chambers beneath our cinema just to store this gigantic instrument. So this was one of the coolest experiences I've ever had. This was actually my first Buster Keaton film. I've watched all of Charlie Chaplin's films, but I've never seen a single one of Buster Keaton. So it was a great introduction to his films. Yeah, I can't wait to check out more of Buster Keaton stuff. Alright, so that was all I watched in January. I think I want to continue just talking about the movies I watch every month. 14 is a lot for me nowadays with a full-time job and everything like that, but it does take some time to try and consolidate all my thoughts on each film. Hopefully I do watch more movies, but a reasonable amount for me to keep making these videos once a month. Please let me know if I went into too much detail for each film and didn't give enough of my own thoughts, or vice versa. Obviously this is the first video of this format, so just let me know. But most importantly, of course, this is for me to just talk about movies which I love. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all next time.